You know, when you hear good manufacturing practices or GMP audits, and it's like, ugh, how do we even wrap my head around all that?
Totally, especially those FDA regulations, right? Like 21 CFR, Part 111 for dietary supplements or Part 211 for pharmaceuticals. Super detailed.
It's a lot. So this deep dive, think of it as your cheat sheet. We dug deep into the FDA regulations, guidance docs, even talked to experts, all to get you ready for a GMP audit.
We really did. I mean, we're talking the code federal regulations, like starting with Part 110 for general CGMP, current manufacturing practice.
Right. CGMP.
Then all the specific requirements for different products. So you've got Parts 202, 203, 210, 211.
211, yeah, that's the big one for pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. But there's more: 216, 310, 312, 314, 316, 320, 330. We even looked at Part 58 for good laboratory practice, or GLP, how that ties into GMP. Oh, and GRAS, generally recognized as safe substances. We covered that too.
Wow, that's a lot of numbers.
It is, but we didn't stop there. We looked at ICH guidelines, that's the International Council for Harmonization. They set those global quality standards for pharmaceuticals, plus GMP audit manuals, analytical testing guides, quality risk management, clinical trial handbooks, even some FDA workshop summaries and videos.
From the FDA and industry experts on YouTube.
Right.
Okay, so our goal, to get you ready for your GMP audit, to make you feel confident, not stressed, and to show off how strong your quality systems really are. So where do we even start with GMP audit prep?
First things first, be proactive. Don't wait till the last minute.
Yeah, you can't cram for this.
No, you really can't. It's about always being ready. And one of the best ways to do that, audit checklists, super detailed ones.
Checklist, okay. But I bet it's more than just a quick glance over things. What should those checklists really focus on?
You got it. They have to go deep, and they have to be based on the actual GMP regulations. So like if you're working with food or dietary supplements, you're looking at 21 CFR parts 110 and 111. But pharmaceuticals, that's part 211 all the way.
Okay, so the checklists help you take those massive regulations and turn them into, like, actionable items you can check off.
Exactly.
Can you give us some examples? Like, what should these checklists be covering based on the regs?
Sure. Think about the facility itself. Your checklist needs to cover things like sanitary operations, general maintenance of buildings and facilities. That comes straight from Section 110.35a and Section 211.58. We're talking walls, floors, ceilings. Everything needs to be built and maintained in a way that prevents contamination. And don't forget ventilation. Section 110.22 talks about having enough airflow to get rid of odors and vapors that could, mess with product quality. Oh, and pest control too. That's huge.
Makes sense. You want to stop problems before they even happen.
Exactly. And speaking of preventing problems, let's talk equipment.
Right, the equipment used in manufacturing.
Yep, your checklist has to cover sanitation there too. We're talking 110.35a and section 211.56b here. It's not just about wiping things down. You need a system for properly cleaning and sanitizing the equipment to prevent contamination. And if you're using compressed air or other gases in your process, section 110.35ag says you need controls for those. They can't introduce any unwanted stuff into the product. And here's something people sometimes forget. Section 110.80 talks about overall sanitation supervision.
Oh, so someone needs to be in charge, making sure everyone is following the rule.
Exactly. Accountability is key.
What else should our checklists include?
Storage is super important, especially for things that can, grow bacteria. Section 110.80 stiff is specifically talks about temperature controls. You have to make sure refrigerated stuff stays cold and hot stuff stays hot. And for pharma equipment, Section 211.67ab says you need written procedures for cleaning and maintaining it. And when it comes to the ingredients, the containers, the closures, you name it, Section 211.82bd is all about handling and storing them right to avoid contamination. And then there's Section 211.84ab, which is about testing and approving or rejecting those materials before they're used.
So every step where something could go wrong, you have to have a plan for it.
Exactly, and it doesn't stop there. Even those little things that might seem unimportant can make a difference.
Like what?
Well, Section 110.110c says you have to clean non-food contact surfaces too, because even those can be a source of contamination. And Section 110.110d4 is all about handling those single-use items carefully so they don't get contaminated. Then you have Section 110.110d5, which is about making sure the sanitizers you're using are safe and effective. And don't forget about regular maintenance for equipment and finished food containers. That's Section 110.80b.
Wow, so many details.
Right. And during manufacturing, you have to have controls to minimize microbial growth and prevent contamination. Section 110.80b2 talk about that. Oh, and if you're working with things like batters, braiding, sauces, that kind of stuff. Section 110.80b has specific rules to protect them from contamination.
It feels like every little detail matters.
They really do. And we're not even done with the checklist yet.
We're not. What else is there?
Let's talk about the actual production, the operations themselves. For dietary supplements, Section 111.410C says you have to carefully check all the packaging and labels before you use them to make sure they match the master manufacturing record.
No going rope with the labels.
Exactly. And then Section 111.415 says that everything, the filling, the assembly, the packaging, the labeling, it all has to be done in a way that makes sure the final product meets those quality standards in that master manufacturing record. Your checklist should have steps to double check all of this.
Got it. So the checklist isn't just about physical stuff. It's also about making sure you're following procedures.
Yes, it's all connected.
All right, so the checklists are like our first line of defense. They keep us on track. What's the next big thing to focus on for audit prep?
Documentation, it's like the evidence you present to the auditor. It has to tell the whole story of your manufacturing process and all the controls you have in place. For dietary supplements, Section 111.410 says you have to keep documentation that lets you trace the complete manufacturing history of each product, like where it came from, what happened to it, all the way through distribution. And those records can't be like scribbled on napkins.
Right, they have to be complete and easy to find. So what are the specific types of documents that auditors are going to be super interested in, especially for pharmaceuticals, under 21 CFR Part 211?
Oh, they're going to want to see it all, starting with those written procedures for cleaning and maintaining equipment. Section 211.67B is all about that. And then they'll want to see your procedures for handling, storing, testing, and approving or rejecting every single component, container, and closure you use. Section 211.80A covers that.
Makes sense. So they know you have a plan for everything.
Right, but they're not just going to look at procedures. They want records, too. Like Section 211.184A says you need detailed records for everything that comes into your facility, like the name of the supplier, the lot number, the quantity, the date it was received, your internal code.
Wow, that is detailed.
It is, because they want to be able to trace everything back to its source. And then there's the testing.
Right, all the testing you do on the materials and the finished product.
Super important. Section 211.184B says you have to document the results of all those tests and what conclusions you drew from them.
It's not enough to just do the test. You have to show what you learned from it.
Exactly. And Section 211.192 says that your quality control unit needs to review and approve all production and control records before you release any product. It's that extra layer of quality checking.
Okay, so someone else is double-checking your work, making sure everything is good to go. Makes sense. What other types of records do auditors want to see?
Well, Section 211.150AB says you need procedures for your warehouse, how you quarantine products, how you store them. And the same section also talks about distribution procedures. Then there's Section 211.165E, which is all about documenting how accurate, sensitive, specific, and reproducible your lab tests are.
So they can trust your results.
Exactly. Oh, and remember to document any rejected products and what you did with them. That's Section 211.165F. And don't forget about procedures for keeping those reserve samples. That's Section 211.170. And if you use lab animals, Section 211.173 says you need to keep records for them too.
This is a lot of paperwork.
Or, electronic records. It feels like you need a record for everything.
Speaking of electronic records, how do those work with GMP audits?
That's where 21 CFR Part 11 comes in. If your electronic systems meet all the rules in Part 11, and the FDA usually considers electronic signatures the same as handwritten ones, unless a specific regulation says you need a paper record. But for the most part, if you're following Part 11, you can use electronic records instead of paper.
That's handy. Less paper to keep track of. But I bet those electronic systems have to be super secure.
Absolutely. Auditors are going to want to see things like audit trails. That's Section 11.10E.
What's an audit trail?
It's basically a record of who did what and when in the system, and it can't be changed or deleted. It's all about proving that the records haven't been messed with, and you need to control who can access the system. That's Section 11.10D. Only authorized people are allowed in.
So if you're going digital, you have to prove those records are safe and can't be tampered with.
That's the key.
Okay, we've talked about checklists, documentation. What else is super important for getting ready for a GMP audit?
Training. You got to have your staff trained properly. They're the ones who make sure everything runs smoothly, and they're the ones who are going to be talking to the auditors.
So it's not just about having procedures written down somewhere. Everyone needs to know them inside and out.
Exactly. And Thomas Catalano talks about this a lot. Everyone needs to be trained on the specific procedures for their job. And auditors will often ask your staff questions to make sure they understand those procedures.
It's like a pop quiz.
Kind of, but it's all about showing that everyone knows what they're doing and why.
Okay, so we have our checklists, our documentation, and our trained staff. That's a good foundation. But how do we go beyond the basics and be really proactive about audit prep?
This is where you start thinking ahead anticipating potential problems and fixing them before the auditor even gets there. It's about being strategic.
Like a chess game.
You got it. And one of the best ways to do that is through risk assessment. You need to look at your systems and your processes and figure out where the weak spots are, and then you come up with ways to fix them.
So you're not just reacting to problems, you're preventing them.
Exactly. And there are some great tools for this, like cause and effect diagrams, also called fishbone diagrams, and failure mode and effects analysis, or FMEA.
I remember Jose Rodriguez Perez talked about FMEA a lot.
Right. These tools help you systematically identify and evaluate potential risks. It's a huge part of being proactive.
Okay, so we're finding the weak spots and fixing them before they become problems. What else can we do to be proactive?
Mock audits, they're like practice runs for the real thing.
Like a scrimmage before the big game.
Exactly. You do an internal audit that's just like a real regulatory audit. It helps you find any weaknesses in your system, your documents, your training, everything. And then you can fix them before the FDA gets there. Plus, it shows the FDA that you're serious about quality and that you're always trying to improve.
Makes sense. It's better to find problems yourself than have the FDA find them for you.
Absolutely. And there's one more thing that can really help you be proactive.
What's that?
Knowing what the FDA is focusing on.
How do we do that?
Well, they publish data on what they find during inspections, like those Form 483 observations. If you look at those, you can see what kind of problems they're finding over and over again.
So we can learn from other people's mistakes.
Exactly. For example, we've seen a lot of observations lately related to the quality control unit, investigations, procedures, lab controls, and equipment maintenance. So if you know that those are areas the FDA is focusing on, you can pay extra attention to them during your own internal audits and prep.
That's smart. It's like having a little inside scoop.
It is.
We've been talking a lot about manufacturing audits, but are there other types of GMP inspections people should be ready for?
Oh yeah, GMP isn't just about manufacturing. The FDA also inspects clinical investigators, sponsors, and CROs. Those are contract research organizations.
So they're looking at everyone involved in clinical trials.
Exactly, and they have videos about this, like the ones from the FDA's CITC 2024. The focus might be a little different, but the main principles are the same. Data integrity, following procedures, keeping good records. So even if you're not directly involved in manufacturing, you still need to know about GMP.
Got it. GMP's everywhere. One last thing. What about all these changes we're seeing with how regulatory agencies do things? Anything else we need to be ready for?
Well, the FDA is doing more and more remote regulatory assessments. They talked about this in those CITC 2024 videos, too. Basically, they might do part of the inspection virtually instead of coming to your facility.
Oh, so like a Zoom audit.
Kind of. So you need to have the technology and the processes in place to do that, like being able to share documents electronically, maybe even giving them a virtual tour of your facility.
It's a whole new way of doing things.
It is, and it takes some extra planning to be ready for it.
Okay, so just to sum it all up for our listeners, to ace a GMP audit, you need three things: good planning, good documentation, and good training.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on top of that, you need to be proactive. Use risk assessments, do those mock audits, and keep an eye on what the FDA is finding during inspections.
So it's not just about checking boxes. It's about really understanding the regulations and being committed to quality.
Absolutely. And if you can do all that, a GMP audit doesn't have to be so scary.
It's definitely manageable. But it does take work.
It does, but it's worth it. So here's something for everyone to think about. You know how manufacturing is getting more and more complex, and the FDA is, always changing things up.
Yeah, it can be hard to keep up.
Well, how can your company create a culture where you're always ready for an audit, not just scrambling at the last minute?
That's a good question. Something to think about.
It is. And if you want to learn more about all this, dive into the Code of Federal Regulations, the ICH guidelines, all that good stuff. It's all out there.
Great advice, and that's it for this deep dive into GMP audit preparation. Thanks for joining us, and remember, being prepared is the best way to face any audit.